Hey guys, what's going on? So before we finish off with K9 on this week for the post-op of Justice Hunters, we're going to be diving into the future. As Doomsday Dimensions won't be here for a little while, I do think it's time to talk about the future of pure K9 as we close off with this K9 videos for the kind of the just the time being. I'll probably post up other stuff about K9 as I develop my deck list and finally have a proper one, so expect that in the future. But we want to talk about I want to talk about specifically the future of pure K9 because K9 is going to get a lot better, and I do think that this is going to be explosive because a lot of gaps that are missing, the future that's going to be created is going to be nuts. So we're going to get into it right now. Starting off, we have only 2 support cards coming out of Doomsday Dimension when they arrive, but both of these cards will actually change a lot for the pure deck, more so than I think for the engine versions of K9. Now, the reason for this is simple. Both of the cards are designed more for fixing and finalizing parts of K9 as a deck. This is mostly because the new monster in the extra deck and the new monster in the main deck allow you to kind of fill in some gaps that were missing, but also allow you to add a little bit more toolboxy abilities to your extra deck in the case of the RECIEVES monster. And for the main deck, I honestly don't know what the concept was for its secondary effect, but I do think that when you look at it in a second, we're going to understand why these 2 cards absolutely change how pure K9 specifically will run. So getting into it, let's just jump off straight into it. I'm going to go over the first one that makes the biggest impact, that being K9 number 4, Noroi. Now, Noroi is an earth machine, funny enough, but more importantly than that, it has the similar effect where if your opponent has 2 or more cards in their hand, you can normal summon this card without tributing, very standard for K9, and then you can only use each of the following effects of K9 number 4, Noroi once per turn, like I said, very standard. If this card is normal summoned, you can special summon 1 non-machine K9 monster from the deck, but you cannot special summon from the extra deck except K9 monsters while you control that face-up monster. And additionally, for its other effect, you can send 1 face-up K9 card you control to the graveyard as cost. You get to look at your opponent's hand at resolution. Now, just talking about Noroi, Noroi fills a big gap in the archetype because we are still, I think, missing that 1 card that was a tutor. Now, the reason why for this is simple. The problem I've had with running pure at this time is that one of the bigger weaknesses is that if you have an Izuna in hand and you have like Joe in hand, you have to really make a decision if you have another K9 in your hand in terms of like what you want to do, because usually my logic is always use Joe to bring out a lantern, because if a lantern's on the field and if you're going against something like Draco Tail, funny enough, there is a way that you can force your opponent into a situation, because a lot of people, since for my testing with my friends, at first they made the mistake of always using Horn on my lantern and bouncing it back to my hand, which is always the mistake because you never really want to bounce away the lantern, because if it never uses its effect to summon itself to the field, it can do that later on in the turn. But the point is, Joe is always the right target. But what I'm trying to get across here is that you have the ability to tutor out your monsters, because you need to resolve lantern usually to get the case of K9 into rotation unless you've already had it, because you need to access an additional monster either for follow-up, or you need the extra monster as your bridge to normal summon, so you have enough Xyz material here, right? If that comes down to it, you don't really have a monster outside of Azuna that can technically get you 2 monsters simultaneously without actually having to have them already in hand for the rotation or engraved for the rotation. So what Noroi fixes is that being the tutor from the deck means that if this card comes down in your normal summon, it can just be the card that gets you the extra monster you need from the deck, so that you have 2 monsters for the material. The reason that this might actually be very good, if you're thinking, well, it's only a normal summon, Brad, why is this good? Because Noroi is on normal summon, your opponent may be forced to decide if they have Ash to Ash this, but this could be a bait too, where they're like, wait, if I Ash this, he might already have Azuna online, and he'll just summon it and get Lupus on rotation. This is like a mind game you can play with people thanks to Noroi, because if they let this resolve, you will have the monsters you need for Xyz materials, but also if they let it resolve completely, like if you use the second effect, you will see their hand, which is insane. Also, if anyone's wondering, the restriction to only summon K9 monsters if that monster you summon from the deck is on the field, it is not bad at all, because you just turn this into a Ripper with something. So that's kind of the point of why this card is not like, this is not actually that bad of a restriction at all. You literally just make Ripper and you start playing the game. So That's kind of what I want to tell people. Is like you start playing the game. But the point is, why Noroi is broken. It also does not negate the effects of the monster. It summons. This is big because this means Joe Lantern, even Lupus, if you wanted, is online immediately. So if you normal summon, resolve this. If your opponent has some type of removal, you can just chain the Lupus, and then Lupus can exceed. Or if it's during your opponent's turn, by the way, don't listen to that. But yeah, Lupus won't be able to change its effect. Remember, it's only during the opponent's turn. Point is here, if you go into Noroi and Noroi brings down any of the monsters I mentioned, their effects will activate immediately. You can send Lupus with Izuna. You have access to both Lantern and Joe, allowing you to search for monsters and spells and traps. So pretty much Noroi brings together the normal summon you really want to put down. This is the one where you really want to normal summon this, because if your opponent interacted with any of the special summoned, like Joe, or you special summon with Lantern, or you special summon Izuna, this is a normal summon, allows you to come back, bring a monster, and let's get the party started, right? So that's kind of the key thing with using Noroi. Noroi fixes that issue. Now, talking about specifically Noroi's power for its second effect. Now, at first, I was trying to scratch my head at why we actually need this effect, but I kind of understand with what you're trying to do with K9, I think, going forward after this. So one effect that always was kind of boggling to me was Werewolf's first effect during the opponent's turn, because it allowed you to look at your opponent's hand and then rip a card out of it. So at first I thought this was a weird effect, but only because it feels less impactful, because you're like, well, if I rip from their hand, that's not bad, but what's the point in doing that? Well, I believe it's all about the like thematics and the understanding of what K9's based on, because there's supposed to be like what is it called, like mutant like furry police officers, quote unquote. I don't know. I think that's what they're supposed to be based around. But the point is they're doing an investigation. So what is Noroi trying to do? He's trying to investigate your information, so he's looking at your hand. So, that's just me being funny, but yeah, I think that's the concept of what you were trying to do, is that thematically it's like, oh, hey, Noroi allows you to look at your opponent's hand so you can see the information they have. The reason that this card is actually extremely powerful for that effect is that this just allows you that if it's on your turn and you have Lantern in your hand, Noroi is a good normal summon, because you can go Noroi, summon Lupus maybe if you want, or whatever, have their effects proc, then immediately tribute them off with the Noroi's effect, and then you could go Lantern effect, target the monster that's engraved, summon both to the field, and Noroi is now fulfilled a different position of like maybe trying to get under more, or try to get more monsters into rotation under Nibiru, and also give you information, because now X Werewolf becomes a lot stronger, because instead of you just looking at the hand for the first time, you can effectively look at the hand with the Noroi, know what's there, and if your opponent draws a card, you can immediately go for the werewolf on their turn when they use an effect, look at their hand, and then be like, oh, that card is the one you drew, banish. And then you force their hand to play with a really, maybe like Luster, or maybe that was their only play starter, so you can really like punish them that way. Or you just rip hand traps out, and then you know it's there. So it's funny, sometimes you see, and then you're like, oh, I know how to play around it. And especially for K9, this is big, because if you don't see like a board breaker, then you could be like, oh, well, I just need to make a Ripper with Lupus underneath, and that should be enough, because I could get around like Veilers, Imperms, or some other, like, whatever their play starters are. So, yeah, that's kind of the reason I wanted to talk about Noroi, because in Pure, Noroi creates a lot more, like, board presence, because of the situation where, like I said, with the normal summons, is like, you can normal summon most of the monsters, but you're usually only doing that if your opponent disrupted your field, or you're trying to also pop off additionally, but it's like, okay, they've activated an effect, so it's time to normal summon like Joe, so I can go ahead and grab Izuna, so now Izuna's live, and I can just summon it from my hand. So like I said, Noroi fixes a lot of the issues inherently, and it's a very good starter. I think this also allows you to probably play up to 2 Lantern if you really want to, going into the future, because Noroi can't just pull it out of the deck. Because I think Joe is still the stronger one, because you can just reveal any level 5, and yeah, it's still good. But also, like I said, Noroi, if it's not normal summon, is still really strong, because you can look at the opponent's hand, and that's it, because the future with this card is going to be insane. Now let's talk about the Xyz monster. We have K9 666 Jax. Now this one is important because in Pure, and even in engine decks, this is something you might consider running because it is technically generic to an extent, not just because of the monster's summoning conditions, it's the effect. So if this card is Xyz summoned, or if your opponent activates a monster effect in the hand or graveyard, you can detach one material from this card, then target one monster on the field as cost, then you get to destroy a resolution. You can only use this effect of K9 Jax once per turn. A K9 Xyz monster that has this card as material gains this effect during any turn in which your opponent has activated a monster effect in the hand or graveyard. Any battle damage this card inflicts to your opponent is doubled. So, big thing about Jax that we already have to get off the boat, or really like off the top, is like this card can just be made with 2 level 5s. So any of the engine decks can make this. This is a dark monster too, so it's not light, so there's no restriction there. This card is just a generic, kind of effect where when you summon it, detach, pop. Your opponent activates an effect. You go, okay, effect, detach, target, pop. It's only monsters, but still it's pretty good because this allows you to clear the field. But also what this does is that Jax is kind of the card we were missing, I think, in Pure to be the OTK enabler. Now, what I mean by this is that we already have Werewolf, which OTKs, which it can do. But what I mean by is Jax being an OTK enabler is that when you use Jax, what I'm reading here is that if you have 2 level 5s, if one of them happened to be Lantern and you searched for specifically LC Liberation, you now have the ability to kind of go for an OTK against your opponent in 2 ways. So what you're able to do is you go into Jax, detach off whichever monster you'd want. Preferably, if you had Lupus underneath to leave for targeting protection, you get rid of the other monster. So just say it's a Lantern. You detach a Lantern off. Then, okay, you pop the card on the field. Why is this important? You'll see in a second. You'll then proceed to, with the Lantern, you search the LC Liberation. You attempt to enter the battle phase, and Jax attacks into something that it can do minimal damage. You don't really need to do too much. You go to Jax, Jax runs over something, and then still in battle phase, you go LC Liberation, immediately turn Jax into X-Werewolf. X-Werewolf will have 2 materials, but the more important thing is that it'll have targeting protection, but the key aspect you want is that it'll be a 3300 monster that can do double battle damage. Now, this is obviously because if your opponent had used a monster effect or an effect in hand or grave, so do keep that in mind, but the point is, if they have done this, because usually this is the case where you do this, if you have access to this, the Werewolf will have double damage, and it has 2 attacks, having 3300, and if it does any damage, it would be doubled. Why this is important is that if you use Jax effect to clear off a monster, and you still have access to both your attacks, even if you run into a monster where bare minimum, the opponent takes like, let me think the math here, if they take like less than like 1,000 damage, the damage would be doubled, right? So they would take 2k. So if they take 2k from the first attack, when Werewolf attacks, any of its battle damage it would inflict is going to be doubled. So you do at least 2k. Werewolf's second attack is at 33 direct. It's going to do, and you know what I'm saying, it's going to hit for 66. That is game. That is crazy. Now that's crazy in the good way because that's what it's for. But that's kind of the aspect we're trying to do. And if you're wondering, yes, X-Werewolf can make a number of attacks each battle phase up to the number of materials attached to it. It doesn't say on monsters. It says number of attacks. So the point is a direct attack, yes, would work. And because you have Jax's effect, your opponent would be in this position where if they did use a monster effect, they're super dead. Again, if you get my point, they're really super dead because this effect would just, be a lot. And the reason this is important is that Jax in Pure can be more of a one-of. But I think you could almost run like an almost pure K9 extra deck if you want to play pure K9. But the point is, Jax is insane. Almost in combination with something like Noroi, you can see like Noroi bringing out Lantern. Lantern then grabs you LC Liberation. You Xyz for Jax. Jax effect attached. Like I said, I only talk about Lupus a lot because it's the thing that gives you protection. But the point is, you start to see that the OTK combo is now available here because Noroi brings down any K9 monster. You just need to get access to LC Liberation, and pretty much from there you go into Jax. And the funny thing is with Jax, you don't even actually have to detach the material if you don't want to. If your opponent for whatever reason activated an effect, then you just go into Jax, have Jax go to the battle phase, attack with Jax, immediately turn Jax into the X-Werewolf with the LC Liberation. Remember, you don't even have to attack with Jax. You could just kind of go battle phase and then go LC, turn this into Werewolf, and now you have 3 attacks. And if your opponent activated an effect, you have 3 attacks with 3,300 with double damage. Like I said, that's just insane because a werewolf can just chunk a lot of damage onto the opponent and they're probably going to lose anyways. And don't even get me started by telling, if I started stacking Case of K9 as well. But closing it off, I think these 2 cards are insane. I think like what it actually does is that, like I said before, K9 is more of a going second deck. This is just kind of shown with what the deck does. But thanks to Noroi and Jax, the deck just got a lot better, I think, in pure. Now, yes, the engine decks probably can take like advantage of this too. And I said Jax is actually a very good card. But the point is, for specifically the K9 pure strategy, this deck is going to pop off really well. And I really can't wait for Doom's Dimension, where I get to put Noroi and Jax into my deck and really get popping off that way. But guys, I hope you enjoyed this. We did focus this whole week on mostly just K9. I've been cooking up other stuff, and we're talking about Justice Hunter stuff too into next week. So it is mostly covering because this is the new set, but also Digimon content is returning. So do stay tuned if you are one of my Digimon content fans. But also, I do want to thank you guys because we are closing off on Friday. So I do hope that you guys enjoyed this video either into the weekend and have a great time enjoying yourselves. Also, this has been Brad from the Ed Army. Don't forget to comment down below. And as always, this is me signing off. And for all of you out there, to sign on.